In today's presentation, we're going to look at the basics of DNA, what it is, and how you'll use it to further your understanding of your family tree and ancestry. Before we get started, we'd like to state that we are not experts, rather that this presentation will serve as an introduction to these topics. Again, if you have any questions, we do ask that you hold them until the end. So we will get started today with the definition of DNA. DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, is a molecule that is found inside human cells that contains a blueprint for your development and function. It is made up of 23 chromosome pairs for 46 total chromosomes. These include the complete genetic information that make you, you. Your DNA includes a roadmap for all your genes, from your hair and eye color to your predisposition for certain diseases. DNA is made up of molecules called nucleotides. These molecules include nitrogen bases, adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. The order of these nitrogen bases in the DNA sequence form genes, which are the instructions for your DNA expression. All humans share 99.9% of DNA. However, it is the order of these nucleotide bases that gives us the variation between individual people. These genes are passed on from parent to offspring through their chromosomes and DNA. They contain the genetic information or genetic history of your ancestors, and the variations are how we can determine the relationship between people.
So DNA has 23 pairs of chromosomes, 22 pairs of autosomal chromosomes, and 1 pair of sex chromosomes. You receive half of your DNA from your mother and half from your father. Each set of DNA also contains the inherited DNA from their parents and their parents' parents, and so on. Autosomes are the non-sex chromosomes that control the gene expression of an organism's characteristics. These 22 chromosomes code for a variety of features in both your phenotype, so observable characteristics like hair color or eye color, and genotype, genetic composition of a person. The sex chromosome is the 23rd chromosome pair. They are similar to the 22 autosomal chromosomes, however, they code for male and female characteristics. Females have 2 X chromosomes, one from their mother and one from their father. Males have 1 X chromosome that they receive from their mother and 1 Y chromosome that they receive from their father. So genealogy is the study of one's family tree and ancestry. This method of tracking family history has been used most often. This is typically traced through archives and documentation throughout history. An example of this might be a birth certificate or a draft record from World War II. More recently, genetic genealogy has become accessible to the general population through at-home DNA tests. Genetic genealogy is a genealogy method that uses DNA testing to determine the genetic relationship between individuals by comparing their DNA sequences. There are 3 types of DNA that you can use to test your genetic lineage. As a reminder, females have 2 X chromosomes, one from their mother and one from their father. Males have 1 X that they receive from their mother and 1 Y that they receive from their father. So a mitochondrial DNA test tests the DNA that is inherited from your maternal, so your mother's line. Only females pass on mitochondrial DNA to their offspring. However, both male and female children receive this DNA and can test for it. X DNA is DNA inherited on the X chromosome from your father, and only females have X DNA. Y DNA is DNA inherited from your paternal line, so your father's line, and only males have Y DNA.
All right, so One thing that you tend to use a lot of when going through genetic family trees is a genetic fan chart. They can look similar to this one, although you might see some that are a little different, but they have the same basic representation for your ancestors here. So before we get started in the explaining how DNA itself is mapped out on one of these, we wanted to show you exactly how to read one of these charts. So to begin, we have the first inner circle right here is going to be you. So whoever's being tested. So this would be you. And then if you notice, there's another rung right here that goes around this middle circle, and that is going to be your parents. So something to note when you're reading a fan chart, and this will become a little clearer in a few minutes when we go into it, reading an actual genetic fan chart. But typically these little shapes on this side are going to be colored in. Typically they're going to be colored in with like blue or pink to represent like which ancestor this is. So if you'll notice, right here is you, and in the middle there's this line here. This is going to be a representative of your two halves of your family tree. So on this side, left is always going to be your father. So on this side you have your father, and on this side you have your mother. So it would go, anyone on this side of the line is going to be from your maternal side, and anyone on this side is going to be your paternal. So like I said, this rung is your parents, and then going up, your grandparents, and you have 4 grandparents. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4. And it goes up incrementally, or the rungs get incrementally larger as you go through the generations. So you have your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, 3 times great-grandparents, 4 times, and then 5 times. So this is a typical generational fan chart. However, you can see ones that are smaller or bigger depending on how successful you are with your genetic genealogy family hunt. So with that, we're going to go into a Y-DNA genetic fan chart. And that way you guys can see kind of how it looks represented on this fan chart. So Y-DNA is inherited on your paternal or father's line. Males are the only ones with Y-DNA, so they will be the only ones who can trace their lineage through this type of DNA. So in this example, as you can see, our middle circle is filled in, and since we are tracking the Y-DNA, we're only going to be tracking the paternal line. So it's only going to show males in your family tree. And it's not just going to show all of the males, it's going to show a very specific set of males. So from here, we can trace the blue middle circle. And then since Y-DNA is passed on from father to son, we're going to see the father's half filled in here, and he would have received that Y-DNA from his parents. So you actually share the same Y-DNA as your paternal grandfather, who received it from his father and his father and his father and his father, and so on and so forth. So what's important to note with Y-DNA specifically is that Y-DNA is only traceable if there is a son born in the generation from a male descendant. So if the grandfather had only had daughters, the Y-DNA line would not be able to be traced. And we go into that in a little bit more detail in our advanced DNA classes, but that's just something to keep in mind, that when you're tracing lineages here, you're only going to be tracing, especially for Y-DNA, that one line. All right. So the next one is mitochondrial DNA. And mitochondrial DNA is DNA that is inherited from your maternal line. This DNA can only be passed on to children from their mothers. However, both male and female children will have the mitochondrial DNA from that maternal line. Since both male and female children receive mitochondrial DNA from their mother, they both have that X. So this diagram, like we said, is a Venn diagram, and it's going to be used to plot your ancestors through inheritance. So we have two different Venn charts here. If you'll notice, they are the same. We have one which has the male offspring in the center here, and one with the female. And this is just to represent that any DNA that you inherit from your mother's line is going to have this mother right here filled in, and then it's going to show the ancestors on both sides of that maternal line. So with mitochondrial DNA, you're getting DNA from both of your mother's parents, not just the maternal line. You're getting both sides since they were both passed on to her as well. The white spaces that you'll notice here are going to be following a Y-DNA line. So that would be similar to the last one we saw here. So that's why there are white spaces, because that's following a different type of DNA. But what's important to remember here is that mitochondrial, it will look the same for both male and female children. And that inheritance includes both males and females on that maternal line. So xDNA is our third type of DNA, and this is DNA that is inherited through the X chromosome that is passed on to a daughter from the father. So this is only going to be DNA inherited through females, or for a female, since men only have an X and a Y. So this Venn chart illustrates the DNA inheritance of a female who was tested. So we have the pink middle circle here. And then the next rung up shows that she received all of this DNA that is available on this chart from her father. So since we're only looking at the father's side, the ancestors that are connected to the daughter through the blue father are going to be the ones that are available in this xDNA. So why use it in family history research? So some of the reasons you might want to use DNA in your family history and ancestry research is that it can help you break down brick walls to find answers where a paper trail might not exist. Oftentimes, records are not available for certain people in your family tree, or you might not have been able to locate a relative through those means yet. The DNA connection that you can make can bridge that gap and help to fill in some missing pieces. DNA connections can help to confirm the relationships between two people or two families. If two people match their DNA, then more likely than not, there's a genetic relationship there. You can learn about your ancestry and ethnical background. Many DNA companies are able to pinpoint the geographic and ethnic background through testing. So the more people a company has tested in their pool, the more accurate the results will be. And you can see that reflected in DNA tests or DNA companies that have a wide pool, where they're able to not only look at the country, but they can also pinpoint the state or even the city that your family was more or less around during a certain ancestor. DNA can also help to locate the biological relatives of adoptees or people who don't know their parentage. Many times, connections are discovered through relatives that can lead to biological parents and family. DNA is a great way to also verify those ancestral lines that are found through paper records. While paper documentation is a great way to work from, or a great place to work from, DNA provides another strong means to finding a proof of relationship. So an example of this would be if you have identified this person as your third cousin through a paper route, if you both take a DNA test, you would be able to isolate the last common ancestor you had and follow it that way. So how to use it in family history research? Sometimes a paper research trail can be a little tricky to decipher. For example, a last name that might have always been considered German, you know, if you do a DNA test, you might actually find out that the family's from Russia, which can be, you know, discovered through DNA ethnicity mapping. Or you might even find out that a great uncle might have been placed under the wrong side of a family tree. If you thought he was related to you through your mother's line, but you guys matched on your Y DNA line, you can find out that way that they're more paternal rather than maternal. So through targeted testing, which is another topic that we cover more in depth in our advanced DNA class, you can purposefully choose people to test in your family to determine on what side of your lineage they belong. So for example, you could test an uncle to determine whether or not you're related to him that way, or if something else happened and he's not a biological uncle. But DNA testing can also help you find new relatives that you didn't know you had. All right, so using DNA to track lineages. A lineage is the lineal descent from an ancestor. So your grandparents, your great-grandparents, that's a lineage. A matrilineal line is the lineage from female ancestors on the mother's line. So a matrilineal lineage is only going to show your female ancestors. This often gets confused with a maternal lineage, which just means that you're related to someone through that mother's line. The difference being that a matrilineal line shows only the female ancestors, but a maternal shows male and female that are related to you through your mother. And the same goes for a patrilineal line. Patrilineal is the lineage from a male ancestor on the father's line, and it's only going to show that male descendant. Paternal is the lineage that is related through the father's line. So it includes male and female descendants on that side. You can use DNA to test for different lineages. As we mentioned before, Y DNA can be used to track a male line throughout a family tree, so long as the Y DNA is passed on in every generation. And then X DNA can be used to track the maternal branch through the matrilineal line. All right, and we'll pass it on to Malin, who will talk to you about DNA tests.
So DNA tests can be purchased through different companies. The user will provide a sample to a DNA testing company, and they will run the autosomal, mitochondrial DNA, or Y DNA test on the sample depending on the test you choose. Most companies run an autosomal test. Other companies offer more specific tests like Y DNA or mitochondrial DNA. They'll upload the sample to their database, and matches and other information will be determined by comparing the tested DNA against other samples. These DNA samples are measured against each other using centimorgans. So a centimorgan is a unit of measurement for DNA. It tells you how much DNA you share with another person. The higher your centimorgan count is, the more closely related you are to your genetic match. The different amounts of centimorgans correspond to genetic distance. So the more centimorgans you have in common with another person, the more closely related you are to them. This chart organizes this information by generation. While the amount of shared centimorgans helps determine the relationship between two people, it isn't always a clear label of relationship. So for example, you could share 75 centimorgans with another person that you've matched with. However, that shared amount of DNA segment means that the person could be your second or third cousin, or possibly even a third cousin twice removed. The prediction of relationship isn't always clear because of the overlap in the prediction of relationship range, and it doesn't necessarily tell you what genetic line it falls under. You could be second cousins on your maternal line, or you might instead match on your paternal line. So due to this overlap, it often helps to have your genealogical family tree to refer to when you're assessing your genetic family tree, as the former might help to legitimize that prediction of relationship. When you consent to having your DNA tested, there are several things you should consider. You may find out that a person in your genealogical tree is not genetically related to you. So cases of adoption and illegitimate children have been disclosed, and this could be information that is revealed. Tying into this, DNA tests may also disclose information about non-paternal events. So for example, you could receive information that determines that your father, whom you believe to be your biological father, is not genetically related to you. Name changes can reveal surname and first name lineage. So for example, a distant genetic relative might have anglicized their name upon immigrating to a new country. A great example of this is the last name Carre, which was anglicized to Square when the family moved from France to England. If you're testing a family member, it's also important that you receive their consent and that they too are aware of the possible risks associated with DNA testing. So we have some upcoming genealogy programs that we wanted to highlight. On the 14th of September, we have Introduction to Genealogy, and on the 28th, we have Genealogy in Your Pajamas. On October 5th, we have an Advanced DNA program called DNA and Women, and all of these programs are you can sign up for through our library site, planolibrary.org. You can also contact us through the Genealogy Center or by submitting a Book a Librarian appointment through our online portal.
All right, so I noticed we had a question earlier in our webinar chat, and the question was, back to the roots, do all humans come from a common lineage during the creation of the world? So we do delve a little bit more into depth with that in our intermediate and advanced classes. And those are typically discovered through haplogroups. Typically when you do DNA tests with a different company, I know 23andMe and Ancestry identify your haplogroups. So a lot of times you'll be able to find out the maternal and potentially paternal haplogroups if you're a male that show what line or lineage you're descended from. And that'll go back to the earliest known ancestor that they can find. Melinda, is there anything you wanted to add about haplogroups?
So with haplogroups, it looks at the ancient ancestors. So this is, like Alexis said, like thousands of years ago. And then they trace that. I know from, like, my example, my haplogroup typing traced back to around the Horn of Africa. And then it also shows you the migration patterns that group took. So yeah, it's a bit more advanced, and we'll definitely have programs that cover that. But if you are testing with a DNA test company, if you have any siblings that you connect with, like for example, I tested with 23andMe, so they were able to determine my maternal haplogroup. But in order to discover my paternal haplogroup, I had to connect with a sibling, and my brother also tested with that site. So that's how I was able to determine my paternal haplogrouping. So you might sometimes have to connect with siblings in order to determine the full scope of haplogroups. So that's just something to keep in mind.
All right, and then we have another question, and it is one particular company, Ancestry, 23andMe, etc., or specific test better than another for using DNA in your genealogical research? So with that, it really depends on what you're hoping to get out of your genetic genealogy research. If you're wanting to find more specific lines, there are companies that will specifically test one line of your family, like DNA or mitochondrial or something like that. But most companies like Ancestry and 23andMe will do autosomal, and that's going to be, they're going to include the autosomal tests as well as the just information about your parents' lineage. We did go into depth in this one, or into the different tests available in our intermediate class. And that one should be coming up at the end of this year. So if you're interested in learning more about what the different tests look like, what they offer, that would be a great class to take. And then, Malin, did you have anything to add about that?
No, you pretty much covered it.
And then, so the fan charts, we found them, they're available through like the Genetic Genealogist is a great website that has a whole bunch of templates that you can use, as well as you can find them a lot of times in different workbooks. Blaine Bettinger uses makes a lot of great workbooks to find your genetic lineage that way. And then
our next question is, are these tests saliva only, or are there any that can use hair? From my knowledge, there's saliva testing, and I do believe there's also blood testing. I'm not so sure about hair, especially for the general population. I think hair might delve into
hair is more expensive.
Yes.
I know that the tests that are commercially available, like 23andMe, Ancestry, Family Tree DNA, those are going to be saliva or cheek swab.
Oh yes, that was it, yes.
Yeah. And so those are ones that you are going to be seeing more often. I think there are ways that you can pay to have a more advanced DNA test done with maybe hair or blood, but like we mentioned, those are probably going to be more expensive, and those are not going to be commercially available. So any that you're going to find with these companies is going to be usually saliva.
So this presentation will be emailed out. I would give it a couple of days, but you should receive a video copy of the presentation.
And usually you can find these charts. Let me go back to it. Oops. Usually you can find these charts online. Many DNA companies have them on their websites and stuff like that. This specific chart, as you can see, is from FamilySearch.org, and then the Genetic Genealogist also publishes quite a few resources on their website as well. We had a question about how much the tests are. Typically, what I've seen is they're about $100. However, they do a lot of sales. So if you look, if a holiday is coming up, like Mother's Day or Father's Day, or any holiday that usually involves you getting together with your family, they usually have a sale. So just keep an eye on that and keep that in mind that they do drop the price pretty frequently. And you can find them on Amazon or Target and Walmart. They all sell them. So that would be the best place to look for those tests. Did we have any other questions today? Oh. Let's see. There's a hand raised. Mullen, can you see that?
Unfortunately, I don't.
If you're able to type your question into the chat box, that might be the best way for us to see your answer or question. We're not able to see the hand that is raised at the moment. All right.
So our question is, so once you have done the DNA test, can you go with your results to one of the web pages to get the fan chart?
So the important thing to know about the fan chart is a lot of that they're typically not auto-generated for you. That's something you're going to be filling in as you discover new ancestors and relatives. So think of it more along the lines of being a tool, kind of like whenever you're doing a paper trail through genealogy, you're going to be using that worksheet to say, okay, this person is my grandfather, and then this is their father. So with the DNA tests, typically all you receive is your results, such as it's just going to tell you if you match with anybody, what certain things mean. And we do go into a little bit more detail with the intermediate classes. And then with the specific fan chart, you'll have to populate that yourself. Yes, you'll have to make it yourself.
So we have a question. The question is, having watched C.C. Moore using DNA for forensic genealogy in recent TV show to resolve cold cases, is the data provided in DNA tests to Ancestry, 23andMe, and other DNA databases accessible to law enforcement? I do believe so. That is another thing you have to consider when agreeing to the terms and sending in your sample. Is this something that you are okay with? Another thing to consider is also the concept of who owns your samples at the end of the day, and can it be sold to a different company or something of that sort.
So what's important to note with that is whenever you sign up with your DNA tests, usually they have you go through terms and agreements where you have the option to opt in or opt out of various different options. So there are some websites that allow you to opt out of using your stuff for law enforcement aid or anything like that. However, it does depend on the company. So make sure that if you do a DNA test that you do read the terms and agreements so you are aware of what your data can be used for. There are companies that have been known to assist law enforcement first and then inform their customers second. But that is another risk that you need to make sure you understand before taking a DNA test. And that's not to scare you away from the from the process. It's just to make you more aware as you go through it. But like I said, it really does depend on the company. And typically, if information is shared a lot of times, like with a third-party company, it's anonymous. However, they are still sharing your information, but it is for like health, whenever they share it with health companies to determine how genetic disorders can be or something like that, it is done anonymously. So we had a question about how can you determine how someone who is adopted is related to you, who their parent is? So with adoption, typically we don't have all the answers for that. I'll start out by saying that. However, whenever you do a DNA test, oftentimes you receive a bunch of genetic matches. If you and the adoptee both take a test and there are no overlapping genetic markers, you can rule out that you're related that way. But also if you're trying to find out who their parent is or something like that, typically whenever you match with someone, you're able to view the range of relation. So that goes back to kind of this chart. So whenever you test, like say here, there are ranges for how many centimorgans down here that you match with. And they'll usually tell you, oh, this person is either a second or a third cousin. And that's because a lot of these ranges do overlap. If you'll notice here, half sibling, on the higher end of shared centimorgans, you have 2312, but on the low end of siblings, you can see that it's 2209. So what you're looking at here is you can share more genetic similarities with a half sibling than you can with a sibling. So whenever you receive your matches, there's going to be some wiggle room in where they might lie in this. But typically, parents, so if you're trying to find out, if you were adopted and you're trying to find out a parent, a lot of times you can match with, let's say, a cousin who has also tested. And from there you can deduce that, oh, I'm related to one of their aunts or one of their uncles. And from there you can say, oh, okay, that uncle's brother could be my dad. So even if your parent hasn't tested and you're adopted, usually you can find biological relatives by going through other relatives, if that makes sense. I hope that answers that question. All right, and then so what percent, we had a question, what percentage of the population has been tested? So we don't have a number on the percentage of the population total that's been tested, but different companies have different percentages of people that they have tested. So let me see.
Is it Ancestry that has a larger pool of participants?
Yes, and I can get you that number in a second.
So with that, like if you were to test with Ancestry, you might get greater matches because they have a larger pool of people who have submitted their DNA samples. So that's something to consider too if you are deciding on which company you'd like to go with.
And so MIT did a study recently that, and this is across the board and non-company specific. So this isn't going to be specifically like 23andMe or Ancestry, but it says that 26 million people have taken a genetic ancestry test. So as more and more people get involved in the commercial industry for genetic testing, you're going to see a wider pool for just all companies as people become more interested in things like that. It's also important to note when you're going through the options for DNA tests. Some start in certain countries, like Ancestry is more US and European, and I believe 23andMe is American specifically. So it's just important to note with that you also might want to look at where your ancestors are from, because that's going to be the best way for you to find ancestors, by going with a company that's based there. And there's also some, fun DNA tests available. You can DNA test your dog. So you can find out more about their health and where their puppy ancestors are descended from as well. It's not as accurate as people DNA has gotten, but it's always just fun to see. So I always like to throw that out as like a fun family learning experience. Find out where your dog is from. Anybody else have any questions?
All right, well, thank you everyone for your time and for joining us for the presentation. You can find more resources on our website, planolibrary.org, as well as our blog, planolibrarylearns.org. So thank you again, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
And be sure to check out our upcoming programs. And
yes.
Well, we hope to see you guys again. So thank you.
Thank you.